May 14th, Sunday, 1893. I suppose the day starts as any other day after Charlotte had gone to see Heidi. She liked to lock herself in her room, practicing bass to her heart's content. The day suddenly became difficult when Jean-Paul felt entitled to storm into the manor with Beeson's boy Theodore. Dunkelheit Manor had once been my son's home, but he made it clear he wanted nothing to do with it or me, so he had no right to just come and go whenever and however he pleased. Even if his sister does live here, it is not his place to behave in such a way, and it certainly is not in his authority to bring guests to my manor either, despite his company being the son of one of my associates. The moment Terrell had opened the door, Jean-Paul pushed his way in and saw me standing at the front of the stairs, so he marched over and demanded in a tough and straightforward tone of voice,
"We need to talk."
Unlike my son, who was firm and showing no signs of weakness, his accomplice seemed rather timid and nervous about being here. I simply rolled my eye and had them follow me into the drawing room.
"What is this about?"
I inquired as we entered.
Charlotte.
Can't say I'm surprised, especially since you brought him with you. I've already made it clear to him that he cannot have Charlotte's hand in marriage. If this is what this is about, then you can both leave this instant.
You mean that no man can have Charlotte's hand in marriage? Have you ever thought about how she feels about all this? I'm sure she wishes her life was more than just this place.
Charlotte doesn't want to get married. She's content living here.
Oh, really? Why don't we ask Charlotte so she can tell us herself?
I was a little taken aback at first, but not hesitant to comply because I knew what the answer would be. I knew what the answer would be right now if I had asked, and I knew what the answer would be if I wasn't even present.
Fine.
I then called out to a maid.
Hope!
The little mouse stuck her head around the door and she answered,
Yes, sir?
Fetch me Charlotte.
She dimly bowed and scurried off.
I'm sure she'll enjoy the interruption.
My son had then scoffed.
I'm sure she'll enjoy being heard.
I just ignored him and his ignorance. In a minute or so, the sound of the bass stopped filling the halls, and in another, Charlotte was standing in the doorway.
Yes, Vater?
She sternly requested. Before I could speak, Jean-Paul hurriedly tried to get her attention by calling out,
Charlotte!
but I cut him off with a "Shh." I then turned to her and asked,
Do you have interest in any gentleman?
She answered with a nonchalant tone,
Not particularly, no.
What about marriage?
Can't say I have.
Are you content with residing in Dunkelheit Manor?
I suppose I am.
My son once again interjected under his breath,
That almost sounded rehearsed.
but I once more ignored that brat and said,
There you have it, in her own words. Any questions?
As a matter of fact, yes.
He shot me a foul glance before turning toward his sister.
Don't you ever want to know what it's like to have your own family? To be kissed? To be touched by the man you love?
I felt like flaunting him in the assumption that Charlotte would prefer a man over a woman, should she just have attraction at all. Clearly he knew Sapphist existed. Just look at what happened with Heidi and Ida, which was now happening between Hope and Bernice, as secretive as they tried to be.
Honestly,
Charlotte responded in a solemn voice, looking away from everyone. She then perked up a bit and continued.
I couldn't care less about any of that. I mean, I've lived my whole life without those things and I am pretty happy. So I don't see why I would need it suddenly. On top of the fact that it just doesn't interest me at all. I like my life here, I really do.
You have no plans for your life?
I do. My plan is to reside in Dunkelheit Manor as my Vater's secretary. Is that not a plan?
And it was a plan she came up with all on her own.
But Charlotte, you have such talent and potential. Why waste it like that?
My skills don't just end in art, Jean-Paul. I'm very entwined with literature and order. Reading and writing is my forte. Even organizing things gives me pleasure. I do not regret this decision, nor shall you make me.
You don't want more than this?
I don't want more than this.
Suddenly, Theodore, who had been meekly standing in the corner of the room in silence, had asked,
You don't want to fall in love?
But my daughter gave a sort of frustrated sigh as her tone changed completely. I could hear the irritation burn in her throat.
I don't understand why everyone has this ridiculous notion that I should want to fall in love. What good has love ever done for anyone? Heidi died for love. My mare got stuck in this hellhole because of love.
Charlotte!
I'm trying my best to make it as clear as possible that I loathe the idea of love. At least the love you speak of. The only love that I need is not that of a spouse. It's a love that I will never want. I detest it. I spit in the face of romance and the horrors that follow it. I don't have an interest or find myself moved by the concept of sex. Is that enough for you? Have you had enough questions? Or am I still not clear enough?
Theodore grew pale and silent. To be honest, I believe it was the first time I'd heard Charlotte publicly use the word sex in that way. I also think that it was the first time the boy ever heard any woman use it in that way. Or heard it publicly, used for that manner.
If that is all, then I shall like to return to my practice with no further interruptions.
She was obviously past the point of embarrassment and annoyance, and just wanted to stop feigning her strength so she could allow herself some private misery. But not because of her choice, but the reasons why this was her choice. The reason for her contempt. And then there was the guilt and shame people believed she should have for making this choice. People much like her brother believing it was a lady's place to be at her husband's side. Anyone who thought otherwise was clearly mad, especially if the person in question be a lady. And struggling with being seen as a mad girl was something that Charlotte was quite familiar with, and would have to bear for the rest of her life, because of her mother and sister. Before anyone else could speak, I answered her.
Whether anyone has anything else to say, you are dismissed.
She bowed her head and began to exit. I glared over at the insolent boys and said,
So are they. Leave the manor immediately.
Jean-Paul gazed at me for a few seconds and then escorted Theodore out. I went to check on Charlotte later that day, and she was fiddling around with her bass and bow. I entered the room and sat near her in the open lounge chair and asked,
Do you want to talk about young Beaton?
Without stirring from her task, Charlotte monotonously responded.
Not particularly.
After a silent pause, she added more.
I do not understand why neither of them get it. And of all people, does Jean-Paul really think Theodore would be my ticket? I've already told him I think he's a fool. Maybe I should say it more classy, like, how about ignoramus? I doubt it would help, but it sounds more serious.
Jean-Paul doesn't ever have to come back, you know. You only need to say the words and he is forever banned from Dunkelheit Manor.
That is not what I want. I love Jean-Paul and I have nothing against Teddy. They just need to stop it with these silly imaginations of me marrying anyone.
I shrugged my shoulders.
What can I say? I am speechless as well. You would think that such a virtuous man would appreciate his sister wanting to choose a life of chastity.
But I am not joining a convent, so I simply appear to be just another mad girl.
I would never allow that to happen. You're the sanest human I know, male or female.
She shot me a relatively concerned glance and then searched around the room for the continuation of our conversation. Before she could speak again, I dismissed myself and returned to my finances.